What's up everyone, welcome back to more Reddit stories about crazy people, Karens, and all that kind of stuff. Hope you're all doing awesome today. Be sure to subscribe for more Reddit content if you haven't already, and let's get into today's stories. My mom ends up ruining the life of her ex-boss during an exit interview. This happened about 30 odd years ago, and my mother recounted it recently during a family dinner. So back in the 1990s, my mom worked for this big-time company, we'll call Company W, as an accountant. Her boss, the head of finance, was a sleazy guy, and despite being semi-wealthy, it was a big company, and married with kids. He always tried to pick up younger women in the office. Eventually, after a few years, my mom, being the amazing accountant that she is, noticed small irregularities in several statements. I don't know the technical terms, but mom realized that someone was embezzling the company's money for at least a couple decades. Concerned, she brought it up to the head of finance, who proceeded to demean her, call her names, botch her claim, and basically threatened to fire her if she brought it up again. My mother is not one to start crying, and instead sought to prove him wrong. However, a couple months later, head of finance brought in a new lady. Young, she was legit blonde, fresh out of college, to train under mom. My mother instantly knew what this was, and started putting out feelers for a new job. In the meanwhile, she trained the younger lady, who, to quote my mom, was not the brightest bulb. Now, Company W had a policy when an employee was going to be fired. If the employee was being fired for reasons other than rule-breaking, violations, etc., they would be allowed to say that they quit to be able to give their week's notice and get pay. A fair policy. So one day, mom was summoned by head of finance and told that he was firing her. She quickly counteracted and used the policy to her advantage, which angered the head of finance, but he had to comply. Head of finance told my mother in a rather rude way that since she was going about it that way, she might as well do an exit interview. My mother literally had a light bulb moment and said to him that in that case she would. To note, an exit interview is a formal way of leaving a job, akin to an interview for getting the job. It's a way for employees to share their experience and why they're leaving for records, including HR. You can see where this is going. So she was scheduled for the exit interview. When she went in, my mother had to, of course, bring in files relating to her work. I can't recall the exact reason other than it having to be relevant to her reason for leaving, and show it to the interviewer. My mom brought in 3 large boxes of files, each one containing evidence of the embezzlement. She then presented it to the interviewer, who my mother told me was rather stunned, and proceeded to hand over all the evidence and proceed with her exit, including talking about the head of finance's reaction and how not long after the new lady was brought in to replace her. Mom then left the company that day, got new employment, and moved on. It was a decade later that she learned what happened. My dad was a delivery driver at the time and actually made a delivery to Company W. While there, he talked with an employee, mentioned my mom had worked there and how she left, and the employee told him quite the juicy story. In the year following my mother's departure and interview, her evidence was brought to HR and the CEO, who ordered an internal investigation. Hidden cameras were placed in the accounting division. Every file made was screened and photocopied, tiny details scrutinized, and bank records triple-checked. I think you can see where this is going. Yup, the head of finance was embezzling from Company W. But it gets better. They got him on camera making out with the new lady inside the main office after hours. To add insult to injury, the cameras also caught him being cruel to those under him, touching other women, etc. But the biggest thing was still the embezzlement. Head of finance managed to, in over 30 years, steal over $1 million in Company W's earnings, from his days as a mere accountant and all through his promotions. Now, the exact way he was able to get that much over time wasn't told to my dad. I doubt the employee knew, but he did know the fallout. Head of finance was summoned to the Big Cheese's office the day after the evidence was compiled, and let's just say head of finance wished he had simply been fired. He was arrested for the embezzlement and for sexual misconduct, or something like that, as well as a few other things my mom can't recall. The new lady who came in actually revealed that he had brought her in after starting to date her, and even revealed to her what he was doing. Her job basically had been to help him cover it up so they could live the rich life. She didn't even know what exactly accounting was, other than managing money. The perfect cover, so to speak. And if the now ex-head of finance thought being arrested and charged was bad enough, when his wife found out, The employee who told my dad this hadn't been present when the wife had come in, while the ex-head of finance had been let out, but a friend of his had seen what happened. She had just went up, smacked the now ex-head of finance, screamed obscenities at him, before saying she'll be seeing him in court for a divorce. While my dad couldn't learn what exactly happened next, what was clear was that the guy's life was ruined. And my mom, while not a vindictive person by any means, did feel somewhat joyful over the outcome. Lesson to be learned here: never screw with an accountant who actually knows what they're doing. Wife gets arrested for stalking. Me, 50 male, and my wife, 49, have a 23-year-old daughter. She has a good job and lives in a house in the suburbs. She has been renting a house since she got a job. Our daughter doesn't really tell us about her social or love life. Even when we ask, she gives us vague answers. My wife hates this. She feels like she is entitled to know about her daughter's private life, i.e. her social life, work life, love life, sex life, kinks, etc. It turns out that for about 6 months, our daughter has been seeing a 43-year-old man. I don't know if they are dating or friends with benefits. I'm not sure, but my wife found this out when she was helping our daughter move into her house. She had gotten a copy of her key, so when my wife wants, she can go into her house, and she doesn't need to call our daughter to let her know, she can just walk in. At first, I didn't know about the key, but when I found out, I was in shock. My wife found out about my daughter dating the older guy by secretly following my daughter around to see where she goes and tracking her phone. She followed them back to her house, and she demanded to know what was going on. However, my daughter told her to leave. She refused, and my daughter said if she didn't leave, she would call the police. She left, came home, and told me everything. Obviously, I don't want my daughter to date a man who's 20 years older than her. I think it's gross, but I also think that what my wife did was wrong and an invasion of privacy. However, my wife told me that she's her mother, and because she's only 23, our daughter's business is also her business. I told my wife that our daughter is an adult and lives on her own. If she wants to do this, we may not agree with it, but there is nothing we can do. My wife didn't agree and said, "No, that doesn't mean she can date an older man if she wants." I didn't want to fight with my wife over this, so I just said, okay. My wife continued to stalk her and enter her house without asking, and she also stalked and threatened to injure the older man because of this. Because of this, my daughter called the police, and when I told the cops about the situation, they understood it to some extent and gave my wife a warning. They told us what she did was stalking and harassment, and that we needed to leave our daughter alone. If she called them again, they would have to arrest my wife. After this, my wife continued to harass our daughter and her boyfriend. She showed up on her dates at her house. My daughter then got a restraining order against her mother. I told my wife she needed to stop. All she was doing was making her want to be with the man even more. I told my wife she was breaking the law and that if she continued this, she might go to jail. She asked me if we should give her an ultimatum. Her idea was to tell her that if she continued to see the man, we would never talk to her again. My wife said our daughter could be part of our family after she broke up with him. I told her this wasn't a good idea because if he is abusive, we shouldn't push her away. We should still keep a line of communication open. And I told her we shouldn't use our parental influence to try and force her into doing what she does or doesn't want to do. After I told my wife that, she said, "So we should just allow our daughter to do whatever she wants and we should just accept that?" I got frustrated and I just said whatever and left. I texted my daughter asking if I could see her. She said okay, and we met for lunch. I asked her why she was seeing a man old enough to be her father, and she told me she was just into much older men. I tried telling her about the red flags of dating someone older, but she still wanted to do it. I told her that I didn't agree with the relationship, but I would support her and be there for her if she needed it. My daughter said thank you. After that, I told my wife about the meeting with our daughter, and my wife got mad at me for doing that. She said, "We are supposed to have a united front." I told her there was nothing we could do except be there for her, but my wife is still adamant about doing something. I told her our daughter got a restraining order against her. If she keeps this up, she will go to jail. I tried telling her that, and the cops who came by her house tried telling her that, but she still didn't listen. She went to my daughter's house and basically broke in and yelled at her daughter, telling her, "Better end this relationship now. I don't care what you want or what you were into." Because of the yelling, one of our neighbors called the police, and my daughter told the cops everything. The cops asked if my daughter wanted to press charges, and she did, so my wife was arrested. She was charged with violating restraining order, breaking and entering, assault, and harassment. I paid my wife's bail, but she still has a trial. My wife claimed that the cops were racist for arresting her. We are a black family. I got frustrated and I told her no, she was arrested for breaking multiple laws. She told me our daughter disrespected her and she is tired of the disrespect. She also said it was wrong of me to tell her it was her fault. Also, I told her that it was a little hypocritical of her to claim she doesn't like our daughter's disrespect, even though my wife constantly disrespects her parents all the time. For example, when we go to their house to stay there for a holiday or just visit, my wife will yell at them and cuss them out sometimes. She told me that was different because she's in her 40s, and our daughter is barely in her 20s, so our daughter has to respect us. Corporate HR tries to flex, almost gets arrested by the county sheriff. So at the time of this story, I had been working in search and rescue for the county sheriff for several years, having been certified by the federal government as an emergency services manager. My plant manager was very happy to let me go whenever there was an emergency that required my assistance, as I was a 10-year employee and a hard worker. Then my plant manager goes on vacation. I received a page declaring a local emergency due to flooding. This is truly a life and death emergency. I contact the plant HR and tell her I am leaving, not knowing the head of corporate HR is there and has the phone on speaker. Corporate HR proceeds to tell me if I leave, it is job abandonment and I will be fired. I am actually in the plant that day only to assist in epoxying the floor. The plant is shut down for Christmas. I explain it is an emergency and the plant manager has always released me for emergencies requiring my presence. She stands firm, so I contact the search and rescue manager who promptly says it will be handled ASAP. Within minutes, I am called to the front office where the sheriff is on speakerphone. When the corporate HR lets him know I am present, he then states, if anyone interferes with my going to save lives, they will be arrested. He tells them he will be faxing them the relevant state law as well as a letter explaining my duties within search and rescue and a glowing review of my service with the sheriff's department. He explains that these will go into my personnel file. Corporate HR may have a degree, but apparently no common sense. She starts to tell him, well, in Denver. Sheriff cuts in to tell her we are not in Colorado, but she can take a vacation in county jail if she wishes. Needless to say, I was quickly out doing search and rescue duties. That was 10 years ago, but the corporate HR manager still shoots me dirty looks whenever she visits the plant. I just laugh. Anyway, that's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it. If you enjoyed, be sure to drop a like and hit that subscribe button as well for more Reddit stories. So I'm out of here, take care, and I'll see you next time.